cloud hands, the best way I can teach it to you is like you have a big old-fashioned round clock with numbers, okay? And with the direction of 12 o'clock, your 9 o'clock, right? And your 3 o'clock here, something happens on those three numbers. And when I say two things happen, it's not just the hand, it's also the feet. But when one thing happens, it's only the hand. But here again, we don't do cloud hands like this. What's wrong with that? My hands look like they're in the right position. They look like they're flowing. But I'm not engaging my core. Okay, so all I need to do is set my hand up, I move my hand. I move my waist. If I don't move my waist, my hands stay here. But once my hips and waist are turning, my hands move. But it's not just merely like this. If you watch carefully, if my hips and waist move, my hands move, but not on their own. Maybe there, but watch. The hands are left here. If my hips and waist don't move, my hands don't move. But once they are activated, they move. And we can do it in any fashion. If my hands will move because they're attached to my hips and waist. This is not Tai Chi. But once we know that 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock, we have to get to 12 o'clock, the hips and waist move my motion. Okay? So let's leave with cloud hands, okay? So to get in and out of cloud hands is kind of tricky. We'll leave it for next week. But cloud hands occurs after you part the wild horse's mane, okay? Let's see. Let's just start. This is a drill, okay? So we know that our feet are like piano keys. We're directing the movement like a crab walk, going sideways. And when we need to go the other way, we firm down and we open. And like a piano, and like our toes and our fingers, we press down. With that down, this guy can come up, and we lead with the toe or lead with the fingers on a piano, okay? So here's our clock in front of us, we're imagining, and we're in a 1 or 2 o'clock position. But once we're in motion, we can go out to the 9, we can go out to the 3, but in a stable position, we're about 1 or 2. The left hand is higher, the right hand is lower. One hand is higher, one hand is lower, one hand and the palm is looking at us, and the top hand, the palm is always facing us, whereas the bottom hand is always a push and the palm is away. We're only doing hand now, okay? 12 o'clock, we drop that bottom hand, turn our hips and waist. 9 o'clock, 2 things happen. Well, one thing happens for now. We change positions of the hand. So now the right hand, palm is facing, turn our hips and waist. 12 o'clock, you have a stem of the top hand and dangling of the bottom hand at your danten. Turn the hips and waist. 2 o'clock, what happens? 2 things happen. Flip the hands. The left hand is higher. Turn the hips and waist. 12 o'clock. Turn the hips and waist. 9 o'clock, 2 things happen. Flip the hands, okay, and we're only doing one thing happens because we're not doing our feet right now. Turn the hips and waist, 12 o'clock. Turn the hips and waist, 2 o'clock. Flip the hands. Turn the hips and waist. Do not move your hand. Change position. Begin to turn the hips and waist to 12. Turn the hips and waist to get to 3. 2 things happen. One thing happens for us right now. 12 o'clock. So let's go a little faster. If my hips and waist move faster, hey, my hands move in sync. Okay, so I want you to play with this a little bit. To cinch down the principle that if my hips and waist move and direct me, my hands have very little thing to do. It goes for the ride. Okay, and then you can say, okay, time to slow it down. But make sure the hips and waist are engaged. And if you were to do it for 15, 10, 5 minutes, you'll say, wow, this is very relaxing. At the same time you're doing this, you must ask yourself, are my shoulders dropped? The shoulders should be dropped, although my hands are a little bit elevated. Okay? On and on. So in this movement, we are using matching of the hips and waist, although we were in a steady position, but you can see that the hips and waist were directing our movements. We're also erect. We're also going to shift our weight as we crab walk, so that's another substantial, insubstantial. We're also rotating on our axis. Our axis is our spine, and we're not just keeping it steady like this, but we're turning, rotating. We're a marionette, and we're dangling, and the clouds are being moved and flowing in this direction, in those finer details through the movement and the mind of ourselves. Not like this, not like this, but like this. Okay? So get that, understand that, and then we'll put it together. Then say to yourself, am I applying my core, my hips and waist, my weightless foot, and insubstantial, substantial in all my movements? Then most of all, make sure that you're still in good Tai Chi posture. And you can check yourself and make sure that you're not erect and locking any of your joints, especially your knees, but also your shoulder joints and also your arm joints. You don't want to part the wild horse's mane and make it like this. I'm locked here, but I don't want to be just floppy. I want to have some firmness, but not restrict anything in your body, okay? There's a tendency for men, we find, who can't really sit down. So you want to just maybe drill yourself. Stand in good Tai Chi posture and just weight down. Stand up. And so you want that sensation. And you want to also then split your feet. And you want to say, sit back, sit down. Just keep on doing this so that if you know that you can sit back, but do you know that you can sit down? Even if it doesn't show or appear that way, there should be some beginning so that the mind says, I know what that means and I can do it. Then you say to yourself, I get another sensation because I'm not just sitting back, but I'm sitting back, and whatever you can give to lower yourself is fine. You will feel that there is more weight in the back. The knee may not show that much, but eventually it'll show fully. But how do you get there? It gets softer, just like a rubber band, over time. But in the beginning, it's pretty tight. So we don't want to rush that process, okay? We don't want to, everything's going to be gentle, everything's a journey, everything's going to be gradual, okay?
Maybe trying to understand what is hip motion versus waist motion. Chinese don't talk about that. They just say the waist, but they mean the hip and the waist. Waist movement, hip movement. The top of the body, my back is not bending so much as this is hip. So when you move, it's a combination of rotation as well as this terrific joint, ball joint that can go in multi-direction. So, you know, how much of it is waist movement versus how much of it is hip movement. I think it's debatable from whatever maneuver you're doing, but it's a combination of both. So I think what Lucille was trying to say is, it seems women are more natural. They're very hip-oriented. Men are pretty much soldiers, and their backs are rather stiff. So waist work is okay. But when you tell them to do this, for instance, you know, if we come back, and Tai Chi posture is to be vertical, okay? So if I'm here, I can be, Tai Chi posture is okay. But if I sit back, bend the hip, I'm still in Tai Chi posture. Versus if I'm like this, straight-legged, you lost something here. Versus the hip is bent, not straight. It's bent a little bit, but not the part of the body has maintained Tai Chi posture, as opposed to Tai Chi posture. Where is, you try and do that. I think the men ought to try and do that. Here, stay up and just come back. As opposed to if you sit back, everything drops to the bottom. The stability drops to the bottom. Okay, so practice that. In all the Tai Chi movements, you don't have to break down what is, how much is hip and how much is waist, but try to put both joint complexes into play when you have this move the waist that the Chinese talk about.
So